My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 5 years, my parents have introduced me at family gatherings with a sigh and a forced smile as our Elena, the cleaner. They'd say the word cleaner like it was a terminal diagnosis, something to be pitied but never respected. They sued me for my grandparents' house, the only real home I've ever known, claiming in a court of law that a simple cleaner was too incompetent to manage a property. They mocked my life, my choices, my very existence. But what they didn't know was that while I was on my hands and knees scrubbing floors, I was also building a $15 million company. And the moment the judge asked them about my business was the moment their world came crashing down. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, take a moment to drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because you're going to want to see how this story of family, lies, and sweet, sweet justice unfolds. My life has always been a study in contrasts, a quiet war waged between who I was and who my parents wanted me to be. They were Richard and Carol Sterling, a couple whose identity was welded to the illusion of upper-middle-class success. My father had spent his life chasing get-rich-quick schemes in the world of finance, each one ending more spectacularly than the last, leaving him with a mountain of debt and a fragile ego. My mother's full-time job was maintaining appearances, a task she pursued with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate CEO. Our family's financial reality was a carefully guarded secret, hidden behind a facade of country club memberships and new cars that were always, quietly, leased. Then there was my younger brother, Mark. He was the golden child, the sun around which my parents' universe orbited. Mark could do no wrong. His C-average report cards were framed as evidence of a well-rounded social life, while my straight A's were a sign I needed to get out more. When he was named captain of the JV soccer team, my parents threw a catered party. The same year, when I won the state science fair for developing a new biodegradable solvent, my father patted me on the head and said, "That's nice, dear. Just don't let all those chemicals go to your head." The pattern was set early and held fast. They invested in Mark, his business degrees, his failed startups, his down payment on a condo he couldn't afford. They invested in his image as the successful son. Me? I was an afterthought. I put myself through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, earning a degree in biochemistry. I loved the elegant precision of it, the way molecules clicked together to create something new. It was a language that made sense in a world that often didn't. My true sanctuary, however, was my grandparents' house. It was a sprawling Victorian home, a little worn around the edges, but filled with a warmth our own house sorely lacked. My grandparents, Anna and David, saw me. They celebrated my science fair win with a new microscope. They read every paper I wrote, listened to my dreams of creating eco-friendly chemical solutions, and told me I was brilliant. They were my cheerleaders, my confidants, my true parents in every way that mattered. When they passed away within 6 months of each other when I was 28, the grief was a physical blow. They left the house to me in their will, a decision that sent a shockwave of resentment through my parents and brother. "It's too much house for a single girl," my mother had said, her voice laced with false concern. "You should let us manage it for you." Manage it was code for sell it and give us the money. I refused. That house was the last piece of them I had left. It was my heart's home. The first few years after their death were hard. I was working as a lab technician, a job that paid the bills but stifled my creativity. The upkeep on the old house was expensive, and my parents offered no help. In fact, shortly after the funeral, they came to me with a sob story about a can't-miss investment opportunity my father had. They needed a short-term loan. Like a fool, I drained my grandparents' modest savings, the money they'd left for the house's taxes, and gave it to them. They promised to pay it back in 3 months. That was 6 years ago. I never saw a dime. The weight of it all, the grief, the financial pressure, the loneliness led me to a breaking point. I quit my soul-crushing lab job. I needed to simplify. I started cleaning houses to make ends meet. It was honest, physical work. It quieted the noise in my head. To my parents, this was the ultimate humiliation. Their biochemist daughter was a maid. The mockery was relentless, sometimes subtle, sometimes brutally direct. At Christmas dinner, my brother Mark, now a mid-level manager at a tech company, would loudly complain about his cleaning service, then look at me and say, "No offense, Elena." My father would joke about whether I had any clients in their upscale neighborhood. They never asked why I'd made the change. They never saw the peace it brought me. They only saw the stain on their carefully constructed family image. But they also didn't see what I was doing late at night in my grandparents' old basement workshop. They didn't see me hunched over beakers and test tubes, using my knowledge of biochemistry to perfect a line of powerful, all-natural, plant-based cleaning products. They didn't see the business plan I was writing, the patents I was filing, or the first small investment I secured from an old college friend who believed in my vision. They didn't see the birth of OraClean. They only saw Elena, the cleaner. And that profound underestimation was about to become my greatest weapon. I knew things were bad between us, but I never imagined they would take that underestimation and turn it into a legal declaration of my worthlessness. I thought their judgment was the worst of it, that I could build my life in the quiet spaces they couldn't be bothered to look. But I was wrong. A letter was about to arrive that would drag my secret world into the light and force a battle I never wanted to fight. The quiet life I had carefully constructed for myself shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. It arrived in a long, cream-colored envelope bearing the official seal of the city of Boston. The paper felt heavy in my hand, important and foreboding. For 6 years, I had managed to keep my two worlds separate. By day, I was Elena Sterling, owner of a small, discreet cleaning service. I wore jeans and comfortable shoes, my hands perpetually smelling of lavender and vinegar from my homemade solutions. I had a handful of loyal clients who appreciated my meticulous work and the gentle, effective products I used. This life paid the bills, kept me grounded, and, most importantly, kept me off my parents' radar. But by night, I was the founder and CEO of OraClean Industries. In the sanctuary of my grandparents' basement, surrounded by gleaming stainless steel equipment and the scent of eucalyptus and citrus oils, I was a scientist again. I had poured every spare dollar and every waking hour into this venture. I'd perfected 12 unique formulas, secured 2 patents, and built a small but fiercely loyal customer base through online sales and local farmers' markets. My first big break had come 6 months prior, a contract to supply a boutique hotel chain with my eco-friendly products. The revenue from that deal was sitting in a business account, untouched, waiting for the right moment to scale up. No one knew, especially not my family. To them, my income consisted of the crumpled 20s and hundreds I earned from scrubbing their friends' bathrooms. I slid open the city's envelope with a kitchen knife, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The letter was dense with legal jargon, but the message was terrifyingly clear. The city was enacting a major urban renewal project. They had designated a 4-block area for redevelopment, which included a new transportation hub and commercial complex. My street, with its historic but aging Victorian homes, was right in the path of the bulldozer. The letter informed me that the city intended to acquire my property through eminent domain. A wave of nausea washed over me. This house was everything. It was my home, my laboratory, my headquarters, and the last tangible connection I had to the only people who had ever truly loved me. The letter did, however, offer a sliver of hope. There was a provision for historical preservation. If a property owner could submit a formal appeal, complete with a viable business plan demonstrating the property's ongoing contribution to the community and a significant financial bond to cover potential legal challenges, the city would consider an exemption. The deadline for the appeal was in 60 days. My mind raced. A business plan? I had one. A financial bond? The money from the hotel contract was more than enough. I could do this. I could save my grandparents' legacy. The initial panic began to subside, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and purpose. This was the moment I had been working towards. It was time for OraClean to step out of the basement and into the light. My first call, however, was not to a lawyer. It was to my parents. It was a mistake, a decision born from a deeply ingrained, foolish hope that, for once, they would act like family. "I need your help," I said to my father over the phone, my voice trembling slightly as I explained the situation with the city. I'm filing for a historical preservation exemption, but I was hoping you could, offer some advice, maybe look over the paperwork. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Then, a short, sharp laugh. Advice? Elena, be serious. What are you going to do? Scrub the city council's floors until they change their minds? I have a plan, Dad, I insisted, my cheeks flushing with heat, and I have the money for the bond. Money? What money? Did one of your clients give you a big Christmas tip? He sneered. Listen to me. This is out of your league. You're a cleaner. These are serious people, developers, city lawyers. They will eat you alive. Your mother and I will talk about it. We'll figure out the best way to handle this. The condescension in his voice was a familiar poison. He didn't ask about my plan. He didn't ask about the money. He simply dismissed me. But it was his last sentence that sent a chill down my spine. We'll figure out the best way to handle this. It sounded less like an offer of help and more like a threat. Later that evening, my mother called. Her tone was syrupy sweet, a tactic she used when she was about to be particularly manipulative. Elena, darling, your father and I have been talking. We are so worried about you. This whole situation with the house must be terribly overwhelming. She paused for effect. We think the best thing to do, the only thing to do, is to let the city take the house. We'll make sure you get a fair price, of course. Then you can use that money to get a nice little apartment, something more manageable for you. I'm not selling, I said, my voice firm. I'm going to save the house. A sigh, heavy with theatrical disappointment, came through the phone. Don't be difficult, Elena. This is for your own good. You've never been good with these sorts of big decisions. Just let us handle it. We've called a family meeting for Sunday. We'll all be there. Mark is coming. We'll sort this out then. The line went dead before I could argue. A family meeting. I knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. They weren't coming to help me. They were coming to take control. The battle lines were being drawn, and I was standing on my side alone. I spent the next few days preparing for that meeting like a general preparing for war, gathering my documents and rehearsing my arguments. But I was preparing for a logical debate, and I should have known my family never fought fair. The Sunday of the family meeting arrived with a cold, persistent drizzle that mirrored the dread settling in my bones. I had spent the weekend meticulously organizing my case. I had the city's letter, a detailed draft of my historical preservation appeal, printouts of my business's financials, and the patent certificates for Oraclean's formulas. I was armed with facts and logic, a fool's arsenal in a war of pure emotion and entitlement. They arrived precisely at noon, not as concerned family members, but as a hostile takeover committee. My father, Richard, wore a suit that was a decade out of style, his expression a mask of grim authority. My mother, Carol, swept in as if inspecting a property for purchase, her eyes scanning the living room, lingering on a crack in the plaster, a slight frown on her face. My brother, Mark, swaggered in behind them, phone pressed to his ear, loudly discussing some killer deal before snapping it shut and giving me a dismissive nod. All right, Elena, my father began, forgoing any pretense of pleasantry as he sat in my grandfather's favorite armchair. Let's see this letter from the city. We need to assess the damage. I handed him the folder containing my organized documents. He brushed aside my appeal and financials, pulling out only the city's original letter. He scanned it, his lips thinning into a tight line. Eminent domain, he said, the words tasting like victory in his mouth. It's ironclad. There's no fighting this. There is, I interjected, my voice steadier than I felt. There's a historical preservation clause. I have a plan to meet the requirements. I have the financial bond ready. It's all in the folder. Mark snorted from the sofa where he was scrolling through his phone. A plan? What's your plan, Elena? Are you going to offer them a lifetime supply of your lemon-scented floor polish? My mother placed a placating hand on Mark's arm, but her words were for me. What your brother means, dear, is that this requires a certain level of business acumen. It's not as simple as, well, as what you do. The first incident was this complete and utter dismissal. They refused to even look at my documents. It was as if my preparation, my intelligence, my entire professional existence as Oraclean's founder simply didn't exist. To them, the folder contained nothing but the ramblings of an incompetent cleaner. "The best and only option," my father announced, leaning forward as if delivering a verdict, "is to transfer ownership of the house to Mark." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "What? Why?" "It's simple strategy," he said, his tone condescendingly patient. "Mark has a real career. He has a portfolio. When he goes to the city to negotiate a settlement, they will see a respectable businessman. When you go, they see a maid. He can secure a much higher price for the property. We'll all benefit. We'll make sure you get a portion to find a nice apartment," my mother added quickly. "A generous portion." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. They weren't just suggesting I sell, they were demanding I hand over my inheritance to my brother so he could sell it. They wanted to erase me from the equation entirely. "No," I said, the word tasting like freedom on my tongue. "Absolutely not. This is my house, and I am going to save it." That was when the second incident occurred. My refusal was not met with debate, but with psychological warfare. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand why you have to be so selfish, Elena. After everything we've done for you, we are trying to help you, to maximize the value of this asset for the whole family." "This house isn't an asset," I shot back. "It's my home." "It's a crumbling money pit," Mark exclaimed, finally looking up from his phone. "And you don't have the resources to manage it. Be realistic for once in your life." Over the next hour, they relentlessly chipped away at my confidence. They brought up every perceived failure of my life, my menial job, my lack of a husband, my isolation in this big, old house. They framed their greed as concern, their insults as tough love. They told me I was being emotional, irrational, and ungrateful. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, and despite knowing what they were doing, a part of me started to wilt under the onslaught. I tried to fight back with my facts. "My business is profitable," I said, my voice rising. "I made over $600,000 in revenue last year." My father actually laughed. "Elena, stop it. We're your family. You don't need to make up stories to impress us." They didn't believe me. The truth was so far outside their narrow perception of me that they registered it as a childish lie. That was more painful than any insult. The third incident happened a week later. I had ignored their calls after the disastrous meeting and had hired a local real estate attorney, Mr. Gable, a kind, semi-retired man recommended by my grandparents' old neighbors. We were working on the appeal. One evening, as I was leaving a client's house, I saw my brother's car parked down the street from my own home. He was with a woman I didn't recognize. As I watched, he gestured towards my house. "That's it," I heard him say, his voice carrying on the quiet evening air. "It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but once my sister is out of the picture, we'll have it ready for the market in no time." He had brought a real estate agent to my house. He was already planning the sale of my home, a home I still lived in and was fighting to save. The final, most humiliating incident occurred the following weekend. My mother had called, insisting I come over for dinner to talk things through calmly. Against my better judgment, I went. As I walked in, I saw that they had other guests, the Hendersons, old family, friends, and members of their country club. I was ambushed. Throughout the dinner, my parents and Mark made a running joke of my profession. "Elena is so wonderfully down to earth," my mother said to Mrs. Henderson, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "She runs her own little cleaning business. So independent." Mark chimed in. "Yeah, if you need any tough stains removed, Elena's your girl. She has a PhD in Windex." I sat there, my food tasteless in my mouth, as they painted a picture of me as a pitiable, slightly dim-witted caricature. The worst part was that they thought they were being clever. They truly believed that by diminishing me in front of others, they could force me to submit to their will. After that dinner, I drove not home, but to the office of my first investor and old college friend, David Chen. David was a successful venture capitalist who had given me my first seed money for Oraclean based on a rough business plan and a sample of my all-purpose cleaner that had removed a wine stain from his wife's favorite rug. I sat in his sleek, modern office and told him everything. The letter, the meeting, the real estate agent, the dinner. My voice broke as I recounted the Windex comment. He listened patiently, his expression growing harder with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and was silent for a long moment. "Elena," he said finally, his voice cutting through my haze of shame and anger. "These people are not your family. They are your enemies. They are actively trying to sabotage you and steal your property. You're bringing facts to a knife fight. You need to stop playing defense." His words were a splash of cold water. He was right. I had been trying to reason with people who were completely unreasonable. I had been hoping for love from people who were incapable of offering it. "What do I do?" I whispered. "You fight back," he said, his eyes blazing with intensity. "You hire the best damn lawyer in Boston. You use the resources you've built with Oraclean and you protect what's yours. Stop thinking of yourself as Elena the cleaner. You are Elena Sterling, the founder and CEO of a company that is about to explode. It's time they saw that." I left his office with a newfound resolve. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound. But it was now overlaid with a cold, hard layer of anger. The days of me being their doormat, their joke, their simple cleaner were over. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness for the last time. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me backed into a corner. What they didn't know was that I wasn't cornered at all. I was finally ready to unleash the storm they had been so arrogantly brewing. The resolve I felt leaving David's office was a fragile flame, and my family seemed determined to extinguish it with a hurricane of their own making. For 2 weeks, I threw myself into my work, both for my cleaning clients and for Oraclean. I hired Miss Anya Sharma, a shark of a corporate lawyer David had recommended, whose reputation for dismantling arrogant opponents in court was legendary. I spent my days cleaning, using the mindless, methodical work to process my anger, and my nights on the phone with Anya, plotting our strategy. We were building a fortress of legal documents and financial proof. My family, meanwhile, escalated their campaign. They began calling my grandparents old neighbors, the very people who had watched me grow up, spinning a tale of woe. They claimed I was a squatter in the house, that I was neglecting its upkeep, and that I was suffering from some sort of mental breakdown that made me delusional about owning a company. They were trying to poison the well, to isolate me from my own community. It was cruel and calculated, but I held firm, trusting the truth would eventually prevail. The final, unforgivable act, the one that severed the last thread of familial obligation in my heart, came not in the form of a phone call or a whispered lie, but in another official-looking envelope. It was a court summons. I remember standing in my hallway, the envelope trembling in my hand. I had expected them to be angry. I had expected them to be manipulative. I had never, in my wildest nightmares, expected them to sue me. They had filed a petition with the probate court. The legal language was dense, but the accusations were brutally clear. They were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs, specifically the estate left to me by my grandparents. They were asking the judge to grant my brother Mark conservatorship over the property. Their evidence was a grotesque caricature of my life. They cited my decision to leave a promising career in biochemistry to become a common cleaner as proof of an unstable mind. They included a signed affidavit from a disgruntled former client, a friend of my mother's whom I had to fire for consistently refusing to pay on time, who claimed my behavior was erratic. They twisted my grief over my grandparents' deaths into a narrative of prolonged, debilitating depression. And they stated, with what I could only imagine was sneering satisfaction, that I had delusions of grandeur, claiming to own a multi-million-dollar business while living on a cleaner's wages. They were using the very life of quiet dignity I had built as a weapon to destroy me. Reading those pages, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The hope I had secretly harbored that they might, someday, see me for who I was, that they might love me, turned to ash. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This wasn't about money. This was about my identity, my sanity, my right to exist as I was. They weren't just trying to take my home. They were trying to take my name, my mind, my very self. That was the moment. The bung ting. It was a moment of terrible, clarifying calm. The Elena who cried after the science fair, the Elena who gave them her savings, the Elena who endured their mockery at dinner parties, she died in that hallway. In her place stood a woman who finally understood the stakes. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a war for my survival. And I was done being the casualty. I immediately called Anya Sharma. My voice was eerily steady as I read the summons to her. I expected shock or outrage from her, but there was only a cool, professional silence on the other end of the line. "Good," she said, after I had finished. "Good?" I repeated, bewildered. "Anya, they're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. They're trying to take everything." "Yes," she said, and I could almost hear the smile in her voice. "They are. And in doing so, they have made a catastrophic legal error. They have taken their baseless accusations and entered them into the public record. They have officially, legally underestimated you. And now, we are going to make them pay for that mistake in a court of law." She explained the strategy. We would not fight this on their terms. We would not get bogged down in a he said, she said about my mental state. We would let them build their entire case on the premise that I was just a cleaner. We would let their lawyer present his arguments. We would let them perjure themselves on the stand with their lies and their condescension. And then, at the precise right moment, we would introduce Oraclean. "This is no longer just about saving your house, Elena," Anya said, her voice dropping, filled with the thrill of the hunt. "This is about total vindication. By the time we are done, they will be exposed as the greedy, manipulative liars they are. The court will not only dismiss their case, but will likely sanction them for filing a frivolous lawsuit. We are going to humiliate them with the truth." A ferocious, protective energy surged through me. This wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about justice. It was about honoring my grandparents, who had trusted me with their legacy. It was about protecting the company I had poured my blood, sweat, and soul into. And it was about showing my parents and my brother, once and for all, who Elena Sterling truly was. They had chosen the battlefield. I would choose the weapons. They thought they were dragging a cleaner into court. They had no idea they were stepping into the ring with a CEO. And I had a $15 million secret just waiting to be told. The 60 days leading up to the court date were the most intensely focused period of my life. My world bifurcated completely. To my family and their circle, I became a ghost. I didn't answer their calls, which ranged from my mother's tearful, manipulative pleas to end this nonsense to my father's blustering threats. I let every message go to voicemail, creating a silent wall of defiance. I continued my cleaning route, finding a strange solace in the rhythm of the work. My clients, bless them, knew something was wrong but didn't pry. They offered cups of tea and quiet sympathy, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my legal life. This quiet, visible life was a strategic illusion. The real work was happening at night, in the war room that my grandparents' dining room had become. Anya Sharma was a force of nature, a brilliant strategist who saw the law not as a set of rules, but as a chessboard. Our secret weapon wasn't just the existence of Oraclean. It was the mountain of evidence we were compiling to prove its legitimacy and my absolute competence. First, Anya brought in a team of forensic accountants. For 3 weeks, they meticulously combed through Oraclean's financials, every invoice, every tax return, every supplier contract. They prepared a comprehensive portfolio that tracked the company's growth from a bootstrapped side project to a profitable enterprise. They produced audited statements, revenue projections, and a formal business valuation. The final number came back on a crisp, bound report: $15.2 million. Seeing that number in black and white, certified by a top firm, was a validation that went deeper than money. It was proof. Next, Anya had me gather my own evidence. I documented everything. I made copies of my biochemistry degree and my academic transcripts, highlighting the awards and honors my parents had always dismissed. I printed the patent certificates for my cleaning formulas, each one a testament to years of late-night research and development. I compiled testimonials from my first major clients, including the CEO of the boutique hotel chain, who wrote a glowing letter about my professionalism and the superior quality of my products. The most powerful piece of our arsenal, however, was something more personal. At Anya's suggestion, I reached out to my grandparents' old lawyer, Mr. Hemlock, the man who had drafted their will. He was in his 80s now, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He was horrified to hear what my parents were doing. "Your grandparents knew," he told me over the phone, his voice crackling with age and indignation. "They saw how your father mismanaged his own finances. They worried he would try to pressure you into selling the house one day. That's why they put the house in a trust with such specific language. They wanted to protect you, Elena. They trusted you to be its guardian." He agreed to provide a sworn affidavit detailing his conversations with my grandparents about their intentions for the house and their faith in my ability to care for it. He even remembered a specific conversation where my grandfather had called me the only one in the family with a head for both science and sense. His testimony would directly counter my parents' narrative of my incompetence. While Anya and I built our legal fortress, we also laid a trap. Following her advice, I did something that felt counterintuitive. I leaned into their perception of me. A week before the court date, my father, in a fit of arrogant rage, left a long, rambling voicemail. He called me a disappointment and a fool, and said that after they won, he'd be generous and not throw my things out on the street immediately. It was a vile, bullying message. "This is perfect," Anya said when I played it for her. "He's admitting his intention is to take the house. He's not acting out of concern. He's acting out of greed." We had the message transcribed and certified. It would be Exhibit A in our case for a frivolous lawsuit. The plan Anya laid out was simple but devastating. We would allow my parents' lawyer, a man named Peterson, whom Anya knew to be competent but unimaginative, to present his entire case first. We would let him paint his picture of me as the poor, unstable cleaner. We would not object. We would not interrupt. We would sit there and absorb it. My only job, Anya instructed me, was to remain calm, to look directly at the judge, and to trust the process. "They are going to build a house of cards on the stand," she explained during our final strategy session. "They will lie, they will exaggerate, they will perform for the judge, and we are going to let them. Then, when it's our turn, we are not going to pull out a single card. We are going to bulldoze the entire house." The day before the hearing, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and anxiety that had plagued me for weeks had been replaced by a cold, clear focus. I walked through my grandparents' house, touching the familiar objects, the worn velvet of my grandmother's reading chair, the faint scent of my grandfather's pipe tobacco that still clung to the books in his study. I wasn't just fighting for a building. I was fighting for the memories and the love it contained. That night, I didn't work in the lab. I put on my cleaning uniform, filled my bucket with my own OraClean products, and I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I scrubbed the floors, polished the wood, and made every window gleam. It wasn't a chore. It was a ritual. I was reclaiming my space, reaffirming my identity. Yes, I was a cleaner. I was also a scientist. I was a CEO. I was a guardian. And tomorrow, in court, I would be a warrior. They had started this fight based on a lie about who I was. I would end it with the undeniable truth. The power they thought I lacked was the very power I was about to use to dismantle them. I walked into that courtroom dressed not as a CEO, but in a simple, modest dress, looking every bit the part they had cast for me. It was the last time they would ever see me as weak. The courtroom was a sterile, intimidating space of dark wood and fluorescent lighting. It felt a world away from the familiar comfort of my home. My parents and Mark sat at the plaintiff's table with their lawyer, Mr. Peterson. They looked confident, almost smug. My father was whispering to Peterson. My mother was adjusting her pearls, and Mark was subtly checking his phone. They glanced over at me and Anya, offering small, pitying smiles, as if my presence here was a sad formality before their inevitable victory. I sat straight, my hands clasped in my lap, and did exactly as Anya had told me. I kept my eyes on the judge, a woman in her late 50s with an intelligent, no-nonsense expression. Peterson began his opening statement by painting a sorrowful picture of a family in crisis. He spoke of my once promising career and my inexplicable descent into manual labor. He described my parents as loving and deeply concerned, people who were only taking this drastic step to protect their troubled daughter from herself and to preserve their own parents' legacy from neglect. It was a masterful performance, and I felt a pang of nausea listening to his eloquent lies. He called my father to the stand first. Richard Sterling played the part of the heartbroken patriarch perfectly. He spoke of my withdrawal and erratic behavior since my grandparents' deaths. He told the court, under oath, that I had no discernible income and that the house was falling into disrepair. "We're terrified she'll end up on the street," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. "This isn't about money. It's about getting Elena the help she needs and protecting the family home." Anya's cross-examination was brief and surgically precise. She didn't challenge his claims about my mental state. Instead, she focused on him. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice calm and conversational, "you mentioned your concern for the family home. Is it true that you have 5 outstanding liens against your own property due to unpaid business debts?" Peterson jumped to his feet. "Objection. Relevance?" "Your Honor," Anya said, turning to the judge. "The plaintiff's entire case rests on his supposed concern for financial responsibility. His own financial history is therefore directly relevant to his credibility and motive." "I'll allow it," the judge said, her eyes narrowing slightly at my father. "Answer the question, Mr. Sterling." My father stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "My business has faced some temporary challenges." "So that's a yes?" Anya pressed. "And is it also true that you borrowed nearly $50,000 from your daughter 6 years ago, the entirety of the inheritance meant for the upkeep of the house in question, and have never repaid it?" "It was a family loan," he blustered. "A loan that is now the subject of this lawsuit," Anya finished, before turning back to the judge. "No further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor." My mother was next, and her testimony was a litany of backhanded compliments and feigned concern about my lonely lifestyle. Then Mark took the stand, arrogantly explaining that he was the only one in the family with the business sense to manage the property. The entire morning, we sat and listened. We let them build their case. By the time Peterson rested, he looked pleased with himself. He had presented a consistent, if fictional, narrative. The judge looked at Anya. "Miss Sharma, your witness?" "Yes, Your Honor," Anya said, standing. "The defense calls Elena Sterling to the stand." I walked to the witness box, my heart pounding, but my steps were steady. Peterson's cross-examination of me was condescending. He asked me about my daily routine, how many houses I cleaned a week, what my average income was. I answered truthfully, giving him the numbers for my small cleaning service, not OraClean. "So, to be clear, Miss Sterling," he said with a patronizing air, "you earn, on average, less than $30,000 a year?" "From my personal cleaning service, yes, that is correct," I said calmly. "And you believe this income is sufficient to maintain a historic property with taxes exceeding $15,000 a year, not to mention utilities and constant repairs?" "Yes," I said. He smirked, turning to the judge. "No further questions, Your Honor." He thought he had me trapped. Then, it was Anya's turn. She approached me with a warm, encouraging smile. "Miss Sterling," she began, "Mr. Peterson asked you about your job. Could you please elaborate on your work for the court?" "Certainly," I said, turning to the judge. "While I do personally clean a few homes for long-standing clients, my primary occupation is as the founder and chief executive officer of OraClean Industries." A ripple of confusion went through the plaintiff's table. Peterson looked annoyed as if I were making things up. Anya continued. "And what is OraClean Industries?" "It is a company I founded 6 years ago that develops and manufactures a proprietary line of eco-friendly, bio-based cleaning solutions. We sell both direct-to-consumer online and through commercial contracts with hospitality and corporate clients." Anya walked to the defense table and picked up a thick, bound document. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence Defense Exhibit A, the Certified Financial Portfolio and Valuation of OraClean Industries, prepared by Deloitte." She handed a copy to Peterson, whose eyes widened in disbelief as he flipped through the pages. She handed another to the judge, who began to read, her eyebrows raising higher with every page. Miss Sterling, Anya said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. According to this report, what was Oraclean's gross revenue in the last fiscal year? Just over $2.3 million, I said clearly. My mother gasped audibly. My father's jaw went slack. Mark stared at me as if he'd never seen me before. And what is the current valuation of the company you built, in your spare time, while working as a cleaner? The certified valuation is $15.2 million. The courtroom was utterly still. Peterson was sputtering, trying to object, but he had no grounds. The documents were certified. The facts were irrefutable. Anya wasn't finished. She entered my patents, my degree, the letter from the hotel CEO, and the affidavit from my grandparents' lawyer into evidence. Piece by damning piece. With every document, she wasn't just building my case, she was systematically demolishing theirs. Finally, she turned her attention back to my father. Your Honor, I would like to recall Richard Sterling to the stand. My father walked back to the witness box, his earlier confidence completely gone. He looked pale and shrunken. Anya let the silence hang for a moment before she spoke. Mr. Sterling, you testified earlier that your sole motivation in this case was concern for your daughter's well-being and financial stability. Is that correct? Yes, he whispered. And you had absolutely no knowledge of her company, Oraclean, or its significant success? No, he said, avoiding her gaze. She never told us. So you filed a petition to have your daughter declared mentally incompetent, without doing even a basic investigation into her life or finances? He had no answer. Anya took a step closer. Mr. Sterling, how would you describe your own business career? Objection! Peterson cried out, but it was too late. Withdrawn, Anya said smoothly. She had made her point. She then looked at the judge. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have built their case on a foundation of lies, driven by greed and a shocking, willful ignorance of their daughter's capabilities. They have not come here out of concern. They have come here to steal a house from a woman they believed was too weak and too poor to fight back. They have wasted this court's time and have committed a malicious abuse of the legal process. The judge looked down from her bench, her gaze sweeping over my parents and brother, her expression one of utter disdain. She then looked at me, a flicker of something like respect in her eyes. She cleared her throat. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, the judge said, her voice cold and sharp. Before I make my ruling, I have just one question for you. Please tell the court, under oath, what you know about your daughter's $15 million business. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of their lies suffocating in the face of the truth. It was the sound of my victory. Their silence was their confession. The gavel was about to fall, but the real fallout from this public humiliation was only just beginning. The judge's gavel came down with a crack that echoed the shattering of my family's delusions. Case dismissed, with prejudice, she declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. This means you cannot file this suit again. Ever. But she didn't stop there. She looked directly at my parents and brother, her eyes cold as steel. Furthermore, I find that this petition was filed frivolously, maliciously, and in bad faith. I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay for all of Miss Sterling's legal fees. This court does not take kindly to the weaponization of the legal system to settle family grudges or to commit what amounts to attempted theft. You are excused. The humiliation in the room was a tangible thing. My father seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. My mother was openly weeping into a handkerchief, not tears of remorse, but of pure, unadulterated shame. Mark couldn't even look at me. He just stared at the floor, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Their lawyer, Peterson, was stuffing papers into his briefcase, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As Anya and I gathered our things, my father approached our table. Elena, he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. We didn't know. I held up a hand, stopping him. You didn't want to know, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You had a story about me that you liked, and you didn't let any facts get in the way. It's over, Dad. I walked past him without another glance. I didn't feel triumph, not yet. I just felt an overwhelming sense of exhaustion and a deep, profound relief. Walking out of the courthouse and into the bright Boston sunshine felt like stepping into a new world. The weight that I had been carrying for years, the weight of their disapproval, their judgment, their constant underestimation had been lifted. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like possibility. The news of the court case spread like wildfire through our extended family and my parents' social circle. The public nature of the humiliation was absolute. Being sanctioned by a judge for filing a malicious lawsuit was not something my mother could spin into a positive story at the country club. They became social pariahs overnight. Friends stopped returning their calls. The whispers followed them everywhere they went. Their carefully constructed facade had been obliterated, and they had no one to blame but themselves. My first act as a free woman was to save my house. I paid the legal fees, filed the historical preservation appeal with the city, and posted the required bond. With Oraclean's financials and a business plan to use the house as the company's official R&D headquarters and historical showcase, the city approved my appeal within a month. My grandparents' home was safe. The next step was bringing it back to life. The house had been neglected, not by me, but by the financial constraints their loan had put me under. Now, I had the resources to do it right. I hired the best restoration specialists in the city. We repaired the cracked plaster, refinished the original hardwood floors, and restored the intricate woodwork my grandfather had cherished. The basement lab was decommissioned and transformed back into a wine cellar, and I moved Oraclean's R&D into a state-of-the-art facility I purchased on the outskirts of the city. The house itself became my sanctuary again. I filled it with light and life. Friends came for dinner parties. David and his family came for Sunday barbecues. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. I began to separate the house from the battle. It wasn't a fortress anymore. It was just a home. My parents and brother faced a swift and brutal reckoning. Their greed had a price. Forced to pay my substantial legal fees, my father had to declare bankruptcy. They lost their house, the one they had clung to as a status symbol, and were forced to move into a small, rented condo. Mark, whose lifestyle had been heavily subsidized by my parents, suddenly found himself cut off. He had to sell his fancy car and get a second job to make ends meet. About a month after the hearing, I received a letter from my mother. It was a rambling, self-pitying account of their fall from grace, filled with blame for everyone but themselves. Tucked inside, however, was a single sentence that felt like the beginning of something real. "Perhaps we were wrong about you," she had written. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was a crack in the wall of their denial. I didn't respond. I knew that any potential reconciliation had to start with them doing the hard work of self-reflection, something I wasn't sure they were capable of. For now, my peace was more valuable than their absolution. I was finally free, and I was just beginning to discover what I could build with that freedom. The silence from my family lasted for almost a year. I thought that chapter of my life was closed, but a single, unexpected phone call proved that some ghosts are harder to lay to rest than others. 2 years after the day in court, my life was unrecognizable. Oraclean was no longer a secret basement operation. It was a nationally recognized brand. We had secured a distribution deal with a major organic supermarket chain, and our products were on shelves in over 30 states. The little company I had built from my grief and my passion was now a thriving enterprise, employing over 50 people. I had moved from being a hands-on chemist to a full-time CEO, a role I found both challenging and exhilarating. I spent my days in boardrooms and on conference calls, but I still reserved Friday afternoons for what I called lab time, personally testing new formulas, keeping my hands and my heart connected to the science that started it all. My grandparents' house was fully restored to its former glory. It was featured in a prominent architectural magazine, celebrated as a perfect blend of historical preservation and modern living. The story of how I saved it, the cleaner who built a green empire, became a small, local legend. The house was no longer just a home. It was a symbol of my journey. It stood proud and beautiful, a testament to the legacy of love my grandparents had left me and the resilience I had discovered within myself. I had found a new community, a chosen family of friends, employees, and mentors who valued me for my mind and my character, not my social standing. David Chen had joined Oraclean's board of directors, and his guidance was invaluable. Anya Sharma had become a close friend and confidant. My life was full, not just with work, but with laughter, genuine connection, and a deep sense of peace that I had never known before. The justice for my family had been swift and, in a way, poetic. It wasn't a punishment I had inflicted, but the natural consequence of their own actions. Their financial ruin was a direct result of their greed. Their social exile was a direct result of their public humiliation. They had built their lives on a foundation of appearances, and when that foundation crumbled, there was nothing left underneath. My father, stripped of his ability to play the big-shot financier, had taken a job as a car salesman. From what I heard through the family grapevine, he hated it. The man who had mocked me for manual labor was now living on commission, his days dictated by sales targets and demanding customers. My mother, without her grand house and country club status, had become withdrawn and bitter. Her attempts to maintain her social standing had failed, leaving her isolated with the reality of her choices. Mark's fall was perhaps the hardest. He lost his condo and had to move back in with my parents in their cramped two-bedroom apartment. The golden child was now a 32-year-old man sharing a bathroom with his parents. His dreams of easy success replaced by the harsh reality of 2 jobs and mounting student loan debt. The family dynamic, I heard, had become toxic, a closed loop of blame and resentment. I had maintained my silence for a full year. Then, on the anniversary of the court date, my brother Mark called me. It was the first time we had spoken. His voice was different, stripped of its usual arrogance. It was quiet, hesitant. "Elena?" he said, as if unsure I would recognize his voice. "It's Mark." "I know," I said, my own voice neutral. He was quiet for a moment. I saw your products in the supermarket the other day. The Oraclean stuff. It's everywhere." "Yes, we just launched the national rollout," I said simply. He took a shaky breath. "Listen, I was a jerk. No, I was worse than that. What we did to you was wrong. I was so caught up in what Dad wanted, in being the successful one, that I didn't even see you. I'm sorry." It was the apology I never thought I'd hear. It sounded genuine, born from a year of hard lessons. "Why are you calling now, Mark?" I asked, my guard still up. "Because I need a job," he said with a raw, painful honesty. "And I know I have no right to ask, none at all. But I see what you've built, and it's real. It's not like Dad's schemes. It's something you made. I'm not asking for a handout. I'd start in the warehouse, sweep the floors, anything. I need a chance to do something right." I was silent for a long time, thinking of the arrogant boy on the witness stand and the broken man on the phone. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you could flip, but perhaps second chances were something you could build, slowly and with very clear boundaries. "Send me your resume," I said finally. "No promises. You'll be interviewed by HR like any other candidate. If you get a job, you'll start at the bottom, and you will be expected to work harder than anyone else. And Mark, if you ever show an ounce of the entitlement you showed me a year ago, you'll be fired. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Elena." I hung up the phone, not knowing if I had just made a huge mistake or taken the first step toward healing a wound I thought was fatal. I had established a new boundary, not of complete separation, but of earned respect. He wouldn't be my brother in the company. He would be an employee who had to prove his worth. The old family dynamic was dead. If we were to have any relationship at all, it would be on my terms, built on the solid ground of the truth. I thought that was the end of the story, a neat and tidy resolution. But my decision to let Mark back into my life, even on the fringes, would have one final, unexpected consequence that would test my new boundaries in a way I never saw coming. 6 months after that fateful phone call, Mark was still working in the Oraclean warehouse. He started on the packing line and had recently been promoted to a junior inventory clerk. He was quiet, diligent, and, for the first time in his life, genuinely humble. He kept his head down, did his job, and treated his colleagues with a respect I had never seen him afford anyone, least of all me. He was slowly, painstakingly, earning his place. The final test of our new dynamic came in the form of my parents. They showed up at my house unannounced one Saturday afternoon. It was the first time I had seen them in person since court. They looked older, worn down by the weight of their new reality. They came with a proposition. They had seen Mark changing, working, and they had an idea. They wanted me to give Mark a substantial ownership stake in Oraclean. "It's only fair, Elena," my father said, slipping back into his old wheedling tone. "He's your brother. This company is big enough to support the whole family." A year ago, this request would have sent me into a spiral of anger and anxiety. Now, I felt nothing but a calm, resolute clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list their past sins. I just looked at them both and said, "Number?" But my mother started. "No," I repeated, my voice gentle but unbreakable. "Mark is earning his way, on his own merit. What you are asking for is a handout, and that's not how this family works anymore. Oraclean is not a family safety net. It's a business I built. You are welcome to have a relationship with me, but it will be based on respect, not on what you think you can get from me." Those days are over. They left, not with anger, but with a quiet, dawning understanding. It was the final boundary being drawn, the last word in a long and painful conversation. They finally understood that my success wasn't something to be divided up. It was something to be respected. Looking back on this journey, the greatest lesson I learned had nothing to do with business or law. It was about self-worth. For so long I had allowed my family's definition of me to become my own. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the less important one. Their mockery of my cleaning job was just an extension of that lifelong narrative. They mocked it because it was honest work, and it didn't fit into their world of illusions. But in that work, I found my purpose. I learned that there is no such thing as a menial job when you do it with passion and integrity. The world may judge you by your title, but your true value comes from the character you build when no one is watching. The money didn't change me, but it gave me the freedom to be who I already was. It was a tool, an amplifier. It amplified my voice so the judge could hear it, and it amplified the truth so my family could no longer ignore it. The real power was never in the $15 million. It was in the resilience I discovered on my hands and knees, the knowledge I cultivated in my lab, and the courage I found to finally stand up and say, "This is who I am." So now I want to ask you, have you ever been underestimated or had your dreams dismissed by the people closest to you? How did you find the strength to believe in yourself and prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. I read everyone, and I believe our stories have the power to help each other heal. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by someone else's opinion. Thank you for listening. Remember, true success isn't about the job title you hold, but about the life you build with your own two hands, with integrity and with a spirit they can never, ever break.